Okay, so as I mentioned, my name's Laura and I am the lady behind the Facebook page. So for those of you who are on the Facebook group, I would imagine probably most of you are, which is why you were on the session today. It's me that pretty much answers your queries and questions. I'm a pensions consultant. I've been a pensions consultant for 27 years since I came out of school. Most of that work within the public sector pension schemes, and we do a lot of work with the NHS at Pen-gage, and Pen-gage is actually my business that I set up in 2018, and sort of did that with a view because we knew there was this gap where people needed more help understanding their pension, but financial advice wasn't necessary. It's more a case of you don't know what you don't know, and so if somebody can give you that information, it puts you in a much more informed position, and that's kind of what we strive to do. We do that through a couple of ways. One is that we would work with employers. So we work with some NHS trusts, for example, and we provide training for their staff. And we also do webinars and seminars for their employees to come to. We do individual support. So some of what we're going to talk about tonight might lend itself to that, given that we can do pensions modelling and forecasting and look at different scenarios for you as individuals. We also do those type of modelling scenarios and reports for a lot of financial advisors. So we're like their back office, if you like, so they get their report from us. And we started the Facebook page as well last year because we felt that we could probably do with trying to do a little bit more on a no fee basis for people as much as we can, which has then led into these webinars. So that's kind of how we got to where we got to, but also just so that you are comfortable with the fact that I do know about the NHS pension scheme and like to sort of think that I know what I'm talking about as well, to give you a bit of comfort there. So this is a one-off webinar that we're doing tonight about something called the Choice 2 exercise, what that means and what options you now have. And it's all something that comes off the back of the McLeod ruling. So what I'm going to cover today is a little bit about 2008 and when it arrived. But before that, I'm going to just give you a quick overview of the NHS pension scheme. I'm going to go really rapidly through that. Hopefully you've been on other webinars where I've gone into more detail about what the scheme is. But it's worth a quick recap because that obviously will formulate some of that decision making that you have. So I'm going to talk about NHS pension scheme, the arrival of 2008, Choice 1 versus Choice 2, which will become clear, I promise you. What McLeod's got to do with all of this. And then what you've now got to decide and where you can get help. That's kind of what we're going to try and rattle through as fast as possible. Do ask questions. We've got the chat box running, so hopefully you've been able to see that. Okay. If you pop a question in the chat box and I don't answer it, it may be because I know that I'm coming to that particular thing a bit further into the session, so I'll kind of hold fire. But if you've got any questions about anything that I've talked about, then do pop them in the chat box and we'll try and get through as many as we can. We may overrun, as I've said, never done this before, got absolutely no idea how long this is going to take. If we do, but you have to leave, that is absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. You can just drop off. And as I say, a recording will be available for you to catch up on anything that you missed, hopefully tomorrow, or if not on Sunday. Okay. So let's just do a very quick recap of the NHS pension scheme, just to get ourselves in the right place. So we now have 3 sections in the NHS pension scheme. Oh, Victoria, can't hear anything. Bear with me, everyone. There we go. Right, so we've now got 3 sections in the NHS pension scheme that you're probably aware of. We've got 1995, 2008 and 2015. So you guys would have initially joined in the 1995 section. So anybody who joined before the 1st of April 2008, whenever that was, you would have gone into the 1995 section. 2008, we're going to talk about in a moment, but that obviously came in on the 1st of April 2008. And then the 2015 section came in from the 1st of April 2015. So they're the 3 sections that we've got. And they all work a little bit differently. And that's why I just want to recap on that for you at the moment. Okay, so the 95 section, as we've got here, and the 2008 section are both what we call final pay or final salary sections. And that means that the pension calculated from either of these sections is calculated based on what we call an accrual rate, which is basically a fraction. And that's the rate at which the pension grows, and your final pensionable pay and your pensionable service. So in the case of 95, for example, you can see it's 1 divided by 80 times by pay times by service. Pay is full-time equivalent pay in both sections, and pensionable service is the length of time that you've been in this particular section for, reduced for any part-time working or unpaid leave or breaks or anything like that. Okay, so the way we would calculate the 95 pension is 1 divided by 80 times by the pay times by the service. And with 95 as well, we get an automatic lump sum of 3 times the pension. Okay. 2008 is very similar, but you can see our fraction is different. It's 1/60th. So that means the pension is growing at a higher rate because the smaller the fraction, the bigger the portion. That's how they work. So again, it's 1 divided by 60 times by pay times by service. We don't get an automatic lump sum in 2008, but we can choose to swap some pension for a lump sum if we want to at retirement, and that's called commutation. And then the other thing to note about these two sections is something called the NPA, which is the normal pension age. And the normal pension age is the age at which you can access the benefits without them being reduced for early payments. So you can see for 1995, it is 60 unless somebody has a special class status, or it's 65 for 2008. Now, one of the other things just to draw your attention to is on 2008, where it says your final reckonable pay. So the pensionable pay is the pay that we use to calculate the pension. For 1995, as you can see there, it's the highest consecutive 12 months in the last 3 years. And it's more often than not, it's the last 12 months, but it's not the same for everybody. In the 2008 section, it's different. It's the highest average 3 consecutive years in the last 10, but adjusted for inflation. So what does that mean? That means we look back at the last 10 years before you retire, and we take year 10, year 9, year 8, add them together, divide them by 3 to get an average, and then increase by inflation. And then we do 9, 8, 7, same thing, 8, 7, 6, and so on. And then it looks at whichever one of those is the highest. Now, this is quite interesting at the moment because, of course, inflation has been really high. So inflation's been 10.1% last year, for example, and that is applied to your pay for your 2008 pension, but it isn't applied to the 1995 section. So the pay calculation is different as well across the two sections, which can also make a difference on which of the options may or may not be better for you. Now, in a time where inflation is lower, or more similar to pay increases, that again can look quite different. So it's quite a difficult thing to predict, but it's worth bearing that in mind, particularly if you're somebody who thinks you might take the pension benefits in the next 8, 9, 10 years, then that might drive which one over 1995 or 2008 would be a higher option, which we're going to talk about a bit more as well. So just be aware of that. Hello, Lynn. Yes, everybody gets a copy of the slides after the session. Yeah. We've then got 2015. I'm not going to dwell on this too much because we kind of know about this, but 2015 was introduced when you, in 2015, it's what's been known subject now to something called the McLeod ruling, but everybody is in the 2015 section from at least the 1st of April 22 now. So you've kind of like got 2 sets of benefits as well, but we're not going to dwell too much on that because that's not for today. What we want to look at is 2008 versus 1995. Hello, Anna. Is it pensionable pay within that scheme or when you retire? So both of these sections, both 1995 and 2008, will keep the link to your current pay. Okay, so you might now be in the 2015 section and you might retire in 10 years, but they will still use whatever your pay is going to be in 10 years. Okay, so it keeps that link to your current pay. It doesn't stop when you move into 2015. It's all right. Does anybody have any questions on the benefits before I kind of move on and talk about the introduction of 2008? No, I just do that, you know, so I can have a drink of tea in between things. Okay, so let's look at 2008. Now I'm going to show you a chart. Nobody panic, okay? Sarah, is what calculated for you? Your pensionable pay? Yeah, the scheme calculates the pensionable pay for you. It does it at the time when you take your benefits. It also every year puts it on your total reward statement. So assuming you can access your total reward statement, okay, you should be checking that every single year to check that's right. But yes, it's your employer/payroll team who provide that information to NHS Pensions. Now, it's really important that you do check your data on your statements. Somebody's just been messaging me on the Facebook group tonight to say their 2015 pay has dropped massively and it shouldn't have done because nothing's changed. And she wouldn't have spotted that if she hadn't checked. So she's now going back to query it. So you do need to make sure that you keep your element of the deal on all this. And that is that you need to be checking everything yourselves as well. Hello, Joseph. Is that final pay link definite? As I've previously been told in making choice 2 decision to move to 2008 that I lost my final salary link. No, it's still definite. I think the thing that confuses people is that the definition of pay that is used is different. So for 95, as I've mentioned, it's the last 12, well, the highest 12 months in the last 3 years, which for most people it's the last 12 months. For 2008, it uses the highest average 3, so it keeps a link to your current pay. But if there's an earlier period that's higher when you add on inflation, it uses that. Now, sometimes people think that means that 2008 isn't a final pay link, but it is. It's just calculated in a different way. Elise, is it possible to give some rough principles about whether 2008 or 95 sections are better? I'm coming to that, Elise. Hold your horses. Sarah, can you check the total reward statements year by year retrospectively? No. So the total reward statement is only produced every year and the previous years disappear at the moment. So you can't go back and look at previous years. Now we're hoping they're going to change that, but at the moment you can't. So we say to people every year you need to download that statement and save it somewhere so that you've got a copy of that. We talk about this loads on the other webinars. So Sarah, if you haven't made it to one of the others yet, do that and we'll talk loads about the statements and the data and stuff, okay? So let's look at the history of 2008 then. So here's a chart. It looks horrible. Don't panic. So what we've got is each little section is a year. You can probably see that, and it kind of works its way through in this nice little roadmap. Okay, so I'm just going to run through the highlights just so that you get an idea of what happened. So in 2008, the 2008 section was introduced for new entrants. So that meant any new members who were joining the pension scheme from the 1st of April 2008 onwards joined in the 2008 section. But everybody who was already in the scheme remained in the 1995 section. Okay, that's what happened initially. And then sort of between, it varied, we'll go sort of 2010, 2011, around there. It started in 2009, but it kind of went on for a long time. There was an option for existing 1995 members to move across into 2008 and take all of their 95 service with them and drop it into 2008. And that was the first option. That was the first time this happened. So that was called choice 1. Okay, that's what we now know as choice 1. Then whilst all that was going on, there was a big fancy review of all of the public sector pension schemes, including the NHS, which was called the Hutton Report. And the Hutton Report was looking about the future of public sector pensions and things like fairness, sustainability, longevity, and so on. And following that report, they introduced the new schemes in 2015. Okay, so that all kind of happened between 2012 and 2015. So we knew in 2012 that the new schemes were coming in 2015, and we knew what those schemes were going to look like. And one of the key characteristics of the 2015 scheme is the later retirement age of state pension age. So because of that, there was another opportunity given to people in 2014 to those who were still in 1995 to see if they wanted to then move to 2008. So that was the second opportunity, which is called choice 2, which is why you're all here. Okay, so you should all be here because you took the opportunity to move from the 1995 section and swap into the 2008 because of the second opportunity in 2014. So hopefully that kind of feels familiar to you. I'm going to go into some of this in a bit more detail in a minute. And then in 2015, as we've said, the new scheme was originally introduced. Then we've got this issue around age discrimination. Okay, so the age discrimination affects the way in which the 2015 section was introduced, and that's what we know as the MacLeod remedy or the MacLeod ruling. And the reason for that is because when the 2015 section was introduced, not everybody was automatically moved across into that section. Most of you were. It was a mandatory move. You never had a choice about that part. But some people didn't, and it was because of how close they were to their normal pension age, which of course then made it age discrimination. So that went through a long protracted legal battle, and in 2019, that was when we knew that it was age discrimination from a legal position. And so at that point, the Treasury Department in central government have been trying to find a fix that removes the age discrimination aspect. So that means that they have to go back through everything that links to the introduction of the 2015 section to change it, to remove the age discrimination or anything linked to that. And that's kind of where we are at the moment. So the MacLeod remedy takes effect effectively from April 22. Okay, I'm not going to get into that in too much detail, but the reason you need to know that is because this second opportunity that you had to move into the 2015 section was linked to the way that the 2015 scheme was introduced in 2015. That also comes under the banner of age discrimination. And so because of that, that is why you are now being given that option to change that decision. Does that kind of make sense? So those people who moved earlier up here, they don't get to revisit their decision because their decision was not related to the introduction of the 2015 section, but yours was, whether you knew it or not. That's how it works. Does that make sense? So I've just summarised the two choice exercises for you there. Okay, so choice one basically was a case of the NHS Pensions scheme saying, hello everyone, in 1995 we've introduced a new section for all new entrants. It's called the 2008 section. We want to treat you fairly, so we'd like to give you the opportunity to move into this section if you want to, or you don't have to. So that was one. And then choice two was, hello everyone who's still in the 1995 scheme. Right, so you've had this option before, but we just want to double check because we've got a new section that's now coming in 2015. It's got slightly different benefits, later retirement age and a few other fancy things. 2008 is similar in these ways. What would you like to do? Would you like to stay in 95 or would you like to choose 2008? And that was what you did. Okay, hopefully this feels familiar to some of you anyway. So that's how we've got to where we've got to. Okay. It was a very persuasive letter. I'm coming to this, Lisa. I'm coming. So I've had to trawl the internet archives to see what I can find. So I do apologise for the slightly dodgy quality of some of the images I'm about to show you. Obviously, a lot of this stuff happened quite a long time ago, didn't it? And it's funny how you can't find old things when you need them. Choice one. So let's just rewind back a bit then. How was choice two different to choice one? So choice one, this was the remember, hello, new section here, would you like to join? You were given loads of information that might have looked a little bit like this. Don't zoom in too much because it won't really focus, but it was lots of big fancy leaflets and stuff, and it gave you lots of figures so you can see, you probably can't see, but in the orange box and the blue box it would say these are your estimated figures on this scheme and these are your estimated figures on this scheme and here is all of the information and what would you like to do. That was choice one. Okay, and you also got a DVD, I believe, for choice one, so that was in around 2010 2011. Okay, so that's exciting. Okay, choice two, you didn't really get that because the reason you didn't get it was because choice two came about 3 or 4 years later. So what the scheme said was, well, you had all that stuff, when we did choice 1. So we're not doing it again. We're going to refer you back to that, but we are going to give you a calculator. This is a teeny tiny screenshot of the calculator. We are going to give you a calculator that you can use to have a look at whether you now want to move on to choice 2. So choice 1, loads of fancy stuff. Choice 2, not as much. A letter, access to this calculator that you've got this sort of screenshot of, and a referral back to what you'd had before. Okay. There were about 10,000 people who made the decision to move to 2008 in choice 2, based on a lot less information as well than the first time. Okay. So so just something to consider there. So proportionately, it's 10,000 people out of a pension scheme membership of 1.8 million. So it's quite small, but 10,000 people is still quite a lot of people. Okay. So that was how the 2 exercises were treated quite differently. Again, there's a reason I'm telling you this. It'll become a little bit clearer in a moment. So you might remember that. You might remember getting some fancy glossy stuff. And then the second time around, you didn't really. You got kind of a letter, which I can't track down, and a calculator on the internet, which you can still find if you look hard enough. So that was what you were given to make that decision, and then you had to make a positive selection. So that meant that if you wanted to move from 95, to 2008, then you had to make a choice to do that. If you didn't make the choice, then you wouldn't have moved. You would have stayed in 95. Okay. So are you all with me so far? Fabulous. Okay. Remember, for those of you here, I just want to pick up on some of the questions in the box. This session is very much about this choice 2 exercise. It's not going to cover too many other things, okay? Because we need to be quite focused, and this is because you guys have to make a decision quite quickly based on that letter. Okay. Now, let's talk about McLeod then. So we've touched upon it already, but I just want to rattle through the issues that we've got with McLeod. So as I mentioned before, when the 2015 section was first introduced, a vast majority of you would have automatically moved into the 2015 section on the 1st of April 15 initially. So if you had more than 13.5 years to your normal pension age, and you were in the scheme before April 2012, then you would have automatically moved into the 2015 section. If you had between 10 and 13.5 years, you would have moved, but possibly at a later date that was based on your date of birth. And then finally, if somebody had less than 10 years to their normal pension age, then they didn't move. They stayed in their original section. And that's where the problem was, you see, because it was clearly age was a clearly defining factor in whether somebody did or did not move. So that came under legal challenge by Judge McLeod, which is where we get the name McLeod ruling. The Court of Appeal found in favour of that in July 2019, and then that has meant that right across the public sector, the Treasury Department has got to find a remedy that removes the age discrimination. And again, this is important for you guys with the choice 2 letter, because the positioning is that you received that option off the back of the fact that the 2015 scheme was being introduced in 2015. However, because of this ruling, that isn't really the case anymore. So what the ruling has to do is undo the age discrimination. And the way in which they're going to do that is to roll everybody back so that they have carried on in the 95 or 08 section, whichever one you were in, to March 22, and then you join the 2015 scheme on the 1st of April 22. Now that's happening automatically in most cases. So the issue that we've got here is that you were kind of sent a letter to say, do you want to move into the 2008 scheme because the 2015 scheme is coming in the following year? And actually that's not been the case now, has it? Because it's carried on and we've not moved into the 2015 scheme really until the 1st of April 22. So again, because of all of this stuff around McLeod, that's why you have to get the opportunity to revisit the decision. And that's why we are where we are. So let's come back to that later. Let's look at the letter. So you should, I know some of you haven't, but but you should have. Okay, so if you are definitely a choice 2 person, so if you are definitely a person who joined in the 1995 section, and then in 2014, with the second opportunity, you elected to move across into 2008, then you should have received a letter a bit like what you can see on the screen. Okay. And this is the letter that is saying, hello, Laura, you moved into 2008, blah, 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 McLeod, 2015, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to move back into 95? Here are some facts and not a lot of anything else. And by the way, you have until the 20th of May to make this decision. So that's probably what you've got. And you've also within that got a form that you need to fill in. Okay. So the letter is giving you the option to reverse the original choice 2 decision. So it's basically saying you moved to 2008. Do you want to pretend that didn't happen? Okay. So you can undo that decision that you made. It's available to those of you, as I've said, who took the option in the choice 2 exercise in 2014. I know I'm labouring that point, but I'm aware from some of the comments in the chat, there are some people that don't meet that criteria. So I just want to be really clear. If you don't know if you did, then you can ask them. So if you've got the letter, there's an email address on the letter that you can email to say, did I do this? I don't remember doing this. If you haven't got the letter, but you think that you did move in 2014, then you need to give them a ring and ask them 2 questions. The first is, did I move in 2014? And if they say yes, you say, right, well, I haven't got this letter that everyone else has got. Please send it to me again. The reason that's important is because if you don't fill in the form to say that you want to move back, the default position is going to apply. And the default position is going to be that they will leave you in the 2008 section, which could be right for your circumstances, but it might not be. So if you think this is you, or you've got any colleagues and you think, well, I did move, but I can't remember when I moved, give them a ring and ask them. They have the date on your pension record that you moved. If it's 2011 or before, nothing you can do. But if it's 2014, then you need to ask them then to send you another copy of this letter so that you get the form to make your decision, because the deadline, as I've said, is the 20th of May. Okay, so you need to be kind of moving quite fast on that. All right, so that's what it is. It's telling you that you can reverse your decision, so you can basically undo that decision that you made. It's only affects the group of people who moved in 2014. You need to make sure you've got the form, and you need to make sure that you fill the form in with whatever option you choose. And I'll come on to that in a second, but that's what you must do. Okay, don't do nothing. I am very aware that people do like to file pension letters under B for bin, but this is really important. Okay, this is huge, and we need to stop doing that, by the way, putting pension letters in B for bin, because they are significant financial decisions that we are going to be making or not making by ignoring them and not filling in the form. Okay, so we definitely need to do something. Even if you get a letter like the one we've got on the screens, which is on slide 19 for anyone who's not sure, and you don't understand the letter, reach out. You've done it on Facebook, you're already here, which is great. So make sure you just get that support with you. Okay. The problem that we have is that, you remember when I said with choice 1, let's go back, we got this fancy pack here and it gave you loads of information to help you to make your decision. And then in choice 2, you didn't really get as much information, but you had access to some stuff. With this letter, you might notice a distinct absence of any kind of information specific to your circumstances. So there are no calculators, there's no fancy, oh, Laura, if you did this, it's this, or if you did that, it's that. There is nothing, which is hugely helpful. Now, the reason there's nothing is because the regulations say to the pension schemes, you don't have to give people any more information than you gave them last time. So what NHS Pensions have done is gone back to choice 2 when you made that and said, well, we didn't really give them anything then because they had it all at choice 1. So we're going to take that as we don't really need to give you anything, which is shambolic at best, and means it's really hard for you to make that decision. So if anybody has tried to ask NHS Pensions for some estimates to help you with this, you will have been met with a resounding no. So that is really, really unfortunate. There are things you can do, and I'm going to come on to that in a moment. But yeah, you've got your letter, you need to do something. You need to make sure you fill the form in. Okay. So how can you possibly know? Joseph, sorry. So if anybody can't see, Joseph's put in the chat box there that he's been told they are working through projections and these will be sent out in the next month. Who has told you that, Joseph, just out of interest? Because we've been categorically told they are not doing anything. You called the number on the letter? Interesting. Has anybody else called the number on the letter and got anything? Because yeah, so a forecast is different. A forecast is not the same as this. A forecast is what you would get if you were looking to take your benefits. No, I'm not surprised. As far as I know, they're doing absolutely nothing. So yeah, that sounds more like it, Lisa. So Lisa's called and then wasn't given any assistance. Nicola, they wouldn't given any figures. As far as I know, they're not giving any figures. If they're going to do, they haven't got the capability to do it on the system, to be honest. They would have to set up something separate and process it separately, and they're not going to do that in the time frame that you've got. So I think we're going to have to work on the fact that they're not giving you anything. So what I want to do is try and throw some light onto some things that you might need to consider. And you can kind of take that away. It's really difficult because all of your circumstances are going to be so unique to you. But if I can just try and point you in the right direction on some things, it might help you. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the comments. Nikki was told that a statement was coming out after the initial letter. Lucy, I'll come on to your question in a minute. Victoria, I called the number and was told no figures would be provided and I couldn't consult with a private financial advisor because it would be unable to help. Okay, Victoria, you are aware what session you're sat on and who's running it. Right, okay, let's just go with what Laura's telling you for now. All right, I will keep digging, and if I find that they do or are able to do anything at all, I will of course let you know. But let's just keep going with what we've got. So things you might want to think about, and I cannot tell you the answers to this, not on this. Okay, so you'll just need to mull these over. Okay, when do you want to access your pension? Okay, so let's think back to what we talked about at the start. The 95 has a normal pension age of 60, and Lucy has just mentioned it there. Most people can claim their 95 from 60. If you are somebody who has a special class or mental health officer status within the 1995 section, you might be able to access your pension unreduced from 55. So if you did have that status, and then you got moved into then you chose to move into 2008, you lost that status. But there's a chance that if you reverse your decision and go back into 1995, so long as you've sustained the relevant and right type of role, then your normal pension age for that section will revert back to 55. And that's what that means about most people. So when you want to access the pension is important. Now, the 1995, although it has a normal pension age of 60, it grows a bit slower. The 2008 has a normal pension age of 65. It grows a bit quicker. But if you think you want to take your pension at 60 or certainly before, the chances are, not 100%, the chances are the 95 benefits are likely to be a bit better. Can't say for definite, but that's sort of rule of thumb. Okay. Remember, though, we've got this issue with inflation and pay. So if you're retiring imminently, it could be the opposite is true, but you just need to be aware of that. The 2008 builds up a higher amount of pension, but not an automatic lump sum, whereas 1995 has a lower pension, but a lump sum as well. Some people with 95, you can't swap the lump sum for pension, okay? And some people prefer to have a higher amount of regular income and are not so bothered about the lump sum. So that might be something that affects your decision. So as we've mentioned, would you have had a special status in 1995? Because that could make a difference. The way that you know that you've got a special status, Claire, it's usually job-based. You had to have joined the 1995 section before the 6th of March 1995 and be in a registered nursing role, midwifery, physio, or a mental health practitioner. Usually what I joke about with people is if you've got special class status, if you have to ask what special class status is, you probably don't have it. It's one of those, but it would always be worth checking. So if you're a qualified nurse before March 1995 and you've retained a position that requires a nursing registration as part of that role, it's likely that you would still have that, but you would need to just check your own position there. What's happened to your pay, as we've mentioned before? So 2008 pay is an average of 3 years. 95 is the highest in the last 12 months. So if you had a massive pay increase in the last 12 months, 95 might be higher because it's not being averaged. But 2008 is keeping a link to inflation, which, as we've said, has been super high recently. So maybe 2008 is better. So do you see what I mean? So again, that might come down to when you're thinking of taking the benefits and what's going to happen to your pay between now and then. What's happened to inflation, as we've said, and death benefits. So the death benefits between the sections are a little bit different. So it's worth looking at that. So just things about, kind of flexibility in terms of what you can access, and the partner pension or spouse's pensions are different percentages and things like that. So sometimes we need to consider those things as well. Now, originally, when 2008 was introduced, partial retirement was an option in 2008 and 2015. It always has been. It wasn't an option in 1995. So one of the reasons people opted to switch across to 2008 was the ability to do this kind of flexible retirement. That partial retirement option was expanded to 1995 section in October last year. So you've now got that option under 95 anyway. So sometimes the logic that you might have used to make that decision can also change because of the circumstances that have changed. So you need to kind of look at all of these things to make a considered decision. Now, there is a fact sheet that NHS Pensions have produced. This is the only bit of material that we've got at the moment that is helping you. Looks a bit like this at the top, and this is a link to it here that you'll get in the slides. Now, what it does is it talks you through 2 examples of different people to give you an idea of what could happen to the pension benefits. Now, they are examples. They are only based on these 2 particular set of circumstances. So it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to follow the same pattern for everybody, but it will hopefully give you an idea. And it covers some of these issues that we talked about here. So just to give you an idea, though, these examples are not my examples. I've just used the same numbers for you from the fact sheet to try and keep it consistent, so it's not confusing when you're looking at 2 different sources. In one example, we've got the 1995 pension at 60 versus the 2008 pension at 60. So 1995 has a higher pension and a higher lump sum. Okay. If you then look at them at 65, the 2008 pension is significantly higher at 65 than the 1995 pension is. So when I'm saying it depends on what age you want to retire, that's kind of quite a key factor in this, or the age that you want to access your benefits. Once you start to get past 60, it certainly starts to tip more the other way. But as I said to you before, it's not necessarily the case for everybody. So it's really difficult to try and make those decisions. One thing you might want to do is think back to, why did you make that decision in the first place? What was the thing that led you to think you wanted to be in 2008 over 1995? And if you can remember that, that might help you then work backwards as to what you do now. Both schemes are really good. don't get me wrong, but it's about making the decision that gives you the best financial outcome. Because, for example, if you went into 95 and then thought, oh, well, I don't want my pension till I'm 65, you're going to be thousands and thousands of pounds worse off as a result of that. So that's what you need to do. My mum probably told me it was probably a good idea. Maybe don't ask her this time, Caroline. I'm sure she's lovely, but maybe no. They said due to age would be better off in 2008. I don't think that's exactly what it said. I think what it said was because the 2015 pension age is later, if you're looking at taking your pension later, then it would be better, which is true. That is true. But you wouldn't necessarily be taking the pension at that time. Okay, so I just want to remind you again of inflation. So remember, the 2008 scheme is linked to inflation. Here's a history of inflation over the last 5 years. So it's been really high recently, but that doesn't mean it's going to be really high for the next 10 years, for example. So again, it depends very much on what happens to your pay, where you are in your bands and your increments and things like that. Are you doing car salary sacrifice, all those things? So considerations then. When do I want to access the pension? Ask yourself that. You might not know yet, but you've probably got a feeling. If you're 50 and you've got the prospect of waiting until 65 to get a full pension or a slightly different pension at 60, what feels better? Yeah, so Sarah said there, I anticipated working until 65. So it was a very sensible choice in that case. You may now be reflecting on the decision to think you'll take your pension at 65 and be thinking something different. If you had special status, would you now regain that when you go back into the 95 section? That's a very significant question. What's happened to your pay, and do you value a higher income or a higher lump sum? Okay, so these are things that you probably need to have a ponder about. Yeah, Sarah, actually that feels right. So Sarah's saying here, I was told if I worked till 62, it would be a better move. Quite possibly, yes. As I said, once you get past 60, it starts to tip the other way. So it's just really about your personal circumstances. But it depends on, you know, what you were thinking then is probably not really what you're thinking now. A lot's happened, doesn't it, between then and now within the NHS. But I've been doing some modelling for people on this over the last week or so, and I've seen some cases where going at 60, it's a no-brainer, go back into 95, and for some actually it isn't. They're quite close. It just depends, as I say, on circumstances. So it's really hard for you to make these decisions, I know, because how can you when you don't have the information? So where can we get more help? So I've already mentioned this fact sheet, which is here if you want to have a look at it. It's all right. You might then need to think about other things. You might need to think about whether is it better for you to do modelling. Oh, there you go, Melanie. How can you do? We don't know about future inflation. I'll come on to that in a second. So you might want to look at modelling. So modelling is always a tricky thing to do, because with modelling, what we're doing is we're looking at what the future might be, and you're quite right, we don't know. So we make a series of assumptions. And what we do when we do our modelling is we assume that the increase in pay is the same as increase in inflation, and we assume 2.5% for both. So it's quite a conservative projection. So what that means is, and usually with pay and inflation, you don't end up with a massive distortion like we have done over the last few years for inflation, but it's a model. It's all you can do. You haven't got anything else. So with modelling, what we would look at is you do pension estimates. So what you would do is you say, right, okay, if you want to retire at 60, this is what the 95 benefits would look like at 60. This is what the 2008 benefits would look like at 60. So you can see them side by side. It also then shows you the lump sum options as well within those. If somebody who has in the past had annual allowance issues, which is a pensions tax position, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you don't need to. But we'd have to review that as well, because that position will change as a result of moving back if that's what you decide to do. And then you'd sort of be able to draw direct comparisons then as much as you can based on the information that you have. Okay, so that's what modelling does for you if you feel that you need some extra help. Now, Melanie, does my employer do modelling? You have to pay someone, right? So this is the thing. This decision is your decision. So if you wanted to get external support to help you with this, regardless of who it's with, you will have to pay for it. Okay, there's no ifs and buts on this. And this is why it's really shambolic that the information has not been given from the scheme. And a lot of us have made a lot of noise about this, but it's not changing anything at the moment. Okay. Now, how much that costs, Simon, will depend on who does it for you and what they do. Okay. But what you might be able to do is claim the cost back. So NHS Pensions have what's called a cost claim back scheme, okay? And we've put some information in the slides here for you, which are little links. But basically what the rules say is that where a member, that's you, suffers financial loss due to the public service pensions remedy, that's McLeod, repayment of costs of professional services or advice is possible. Okay, so what it basically says is where you need to pay to get advice or support to help you make some decisions about McLeod because you can't get the information from the scheme, you can potentially claim those costs back through the cost claim scheme. There's no limit on the cost for this bit of work. There are limits on cost for other things to do with McLeod, but we won't talk about that. You have to complete a claim form that has to go to NHS Pensions. They have to consider it and then they have to agree to it. So we cannot absolutely guarantee that they will pay your costs. We would help you to make a case to claim those costs, and a lot of us again are within the sector are doing that. We're saying that you can't expect people to make this decision. You're saying that you will meet the costs if the scheme doesn't provide the information. The scheme hasn't provided the information, so you know you need to give them, you need to pay the costs. But I can't absolutely guarantee it. A lot of us do also feel it's going to be like a PPI claim, so you'll fill it in the form and initially it'll get rejected and then you'll have to appeal, and we sort of think that's probably the approach that will be taken on most claims. I could be wrong. I would like to be wrong, but I think let's just manage expectations. It's about perseverance. And the problem as well is that you have to pay this up front and then you claim it back. And I don't know how long it would take to get it back as well. So again, it's really challenging and it's really difficult. But there are organisations out there that can do this. So whoever was told, where are you? Victoria, I was told no figures would be provided. I couldn't consult with a private pensions financial advisor. They would be unable to help. Is incorrect, because there are some of us that are able to do this and are doing this at the moment. I would far rather we didn't have to do this. I would far rather you could just get the information, because that is a reasonable expectation. But we are where we are with that at the moment. Okay. So within the slides, you'll have information as well about how to get the cost claim back. Okay. To find out where you can get more information, I've got links there again to those fact sheets, to our Facebook group, where we are putting information as well, and the cost claim back scheme. The problem with the fact sheets and our Facebook group is that it's all generic information. It's not going to be specific to your circumstances. But if you can work out things like when you might want to retire, and things about pay and stuff like that, then you might be able to lead yourself to your own decision. If you're any good at maths, you can also probably try and work it out yourself. So you've got the formulas right at the start of the slides as to how we calculate the pension. So you can always have a go at it yourself as well and have a look at it to give yourself a rough idea. All this ever is going to be is an estimate, because as Melanie's already said, you don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. So you can only base it on the information that you have in front of you. Okay. So I don't know if that's helpful. I'm going to come to the questions. I don't know if that's helpful to you or not, whether that's alleviated any pain or not, or whether it's just you still kind of wandering around in the dark. But you definitely do need to think about how you're going to approach this, because it's, like I say, it could make the difference of thousands of pounds a year on your pension benefits, or certainly hundreds, and therefore you need to kind of really consider it really properly. Right, let me come back to the questions. I'm going to go from the bottom up. Where is the best place to get a pension estimate? So a pension estimate, Annette, you can get if you are within 12 months of your intended pension age. If you have a pensions person within your payroll team at your trust, you can ask them. If you don't, you can ask NHS Pensions directly, but you will not get a pensions estimate if your pension date is more than 12 months in the future. You can also only have one a year. I'm coming by. Will annual allowance tax increase if I stay in 2008? So if you're in 2008 already, Sarah, then your annual allowance has already been calculated on the basis that you're in 2008. So that won't change. But if you revert back to 1995, they have to recalculate the annual allowance position because it's about the pension growth, which of course will be different because you're in a different section of the scheme. So they'll have to recalculate that, and that could change the annual allowance position if you move back. Likely to go down, I would say. Can't be definite on that. And the reason it goes down is because the pension figures will go down a bit, and that's why. So if you stay where you are, it doesn't change. There will be a change as a result of the introduction of the 2015 section, and you'll get information about that later this year, but not as a result of this if you stay where you are. Joanna, I've earned more in the last 10 years than between joining in 2005 to 2014. Okay, I'm not sure what the relevance of that is, Joanna, because 2008 uses the last 10 years to when you retire, so not last 10 years from now. So if your pay keeps going up, that will increase the pensionable pay in either section. Okay, let me go back. Most people at 60, I think we've done that. Sarah, there you go. By moving to choice 2, I've been informed I lost my special class status as well. You would have done, yes, because special class doesn't apply in 2008, but it does in 95. So if you revert back and you've maintained a role that keeps that status, then you should be able to retain the special class status. Victoria, if I worked full-time for 15 years, but worked for the last 3 years part-time and intend to do so until retirement, is 2008 better as it will consider my full-time wage? Hang on, Victoria, let me jump back to this slide. Where's it gone? Both sections use full-time equivalent pay. So part-time working doesn't have an impact on this, okay, because both sections use full-time equivalent pay. Right, I'm coming back down now. I think we've done those. Hello, Gary. If I decide to return to 1995, what would happen to my additional pension that I took out before 2015 and also took one out after 2015? Oh, Gary. Right, so let's start with the after 2015 one. So if you started added pension after 2015, it's gone into 2015. But you're being rolled back into either 2008 or 95, whichever you choose, up to 2022. So you can't retain that added pension in 2015. It will get moved and recalculated in whichever section you decide on from choice 2. But 2008, again, it's the same thing. If you've done additional pension in 2008 and you now decide to go back to 95, then that additional pension should transition across to the 1995 section under 1995 rules. Now that is a bit more tricky to work out because how much added pension it will get you is based on the scheme and the age and the factors and stuff. So that is going to be a bit more tricky to work out which is the best option. Lisa, the choice 2 letter talks about if you move to 95, you will have a subsequent decision on how you take your benefits at retirement. 95 versus 2015. What does this mean? Right, so I don't know how familiar we are with McLeod. Let me jump back to this slide here. Bear with me. So remember, with the McLeod ruling, it's all about age discrimination. Okay, so originally when the 2015 section was introduced, the majority of people were moved across into the 2015 section from the 1st of April 15, as you can see here. Because that was age discrimination, it's being rolled back as if that did not happen. So therefore, everybody will be treated as having continued in 95 or 08, whichever one it is, up to March 22, and then joining the 2015 section in April 22. But then when you retire, so this is the same for everybody, regardless as to whether you're a choice 2 person or not, this is everybody. When you then retire, you can then choose how your benefits are calculated. So let's call them option A and option B. So option A is that you're in your 95 or 08 section until March 22, and then you're in the 2015 section. And option B is that you're in the 95-08 section until March 15, and then from April 15, you join the 2015 section. So everybody gets that choice at the time that you retire. And that's what that means, Liesl. So when you retire, you'll then get the choice about 2015 to 2022 and whether you would want that on 95, for example, or 2015. And you won't know the answer to that either until you get estimates about that when you retire. Modelling, roughly, I'm happy to share it with you, but I do need a caveat that it does depend. So if you're somebody like Gary who comes and says, I've got 2 added pension contracts, I've got an ERBO, I've got this, I've got that, it's going to cost more because there's a lot more work that has to be done. But in order to do some comparisons, so for example, maybe we do you 95 versus 2008 at 55, at 60, at 65, for example, something like that. We've got to show you both McLeod options as well. So in total, that would be 2, 4, 6, 8. That'd be 12 calculations we would have to do and put it into a report for you, and then sit and go through that with you to help you understand what that means. That type of work is 625 plus VAT, which is 750. And hopefully, as I say, you'd be able to claim all of that back. But different cases can incur different costs. So it just depends on those options. Hello, Anne. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry. Sorry. Simon, is that an ouch to the calcs? All right, let's do this. Okay, right. So we've got a run. In order to do that comparison, we've got calculators that we've built, okay, that we use for all of the NHS modelling that we do. It's more expensive than our standard modelling, and the reason is because we're having to do everything twice. So we're having to run 95 calcs at 55, 2008 calcs at 55, 95 calcs at 60, 2008 calcs at 60, and so on and so on. It's a significant amount of time that we have to spend, as well as checking your record, checking that you haven't got any service missing, checking everything is recorded correctly, going back through your pay history. We've already talked about the 2 different pay calculations for the 2 different sections. So we have to also run the 2 different pay calculations and so on. So I'm aware it's a cost, and I'm aware it's not right for everyone. And that's why I'm trying to do these free options like these webinars and stuff. But if you want the figures, there is a price we have to put on that because of the amount of work that it takes. If you can't do it, I appreciate that. I'm hoping people will be able to claim it back, but there's not much more I can do outside of that. And I think you'll struggle to find anywhere. There's another company that's similar to us that charges the same as us. And I think once you start going to financial advisors, you could be looking upwards of £2,000 or £3,000. Victoria, for us, it's 650 plus VAT. So 625 plus VAT, so 750 in total. So it's up to you. It's not a sell. I'm just telling that there are options there if you need help, but it's entirely up to you what you choose to do. Just remember that if you make a decision and under this decision your pension is £500 a year less and you receive your pension for 25 years, that's £12,500 worth of pension you missed out on. So when we do talk generally about modelling, what we do say to people is that you might have to pay something now, but because it saves you money later. But again, I totally appreciate it isn't it for everyone. And I really hope that people can claim this back, and we will help you to do that as well. But it is a cost that you have to pay up front, and I totally appreciate that. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm sorry. And what information do we need to make the calculations ourselves using the formulas? So you need your service. So it's already here. Look on the formula. You need your service. So how long you've been in the section for, and you need to know what your pay is. Now use your current pay as a guide. That'll give you an indication. You need to know the age at which you want to take your benefits, and you need to know that if you want to take them before these normal pension ages, you've got to apply the early retirement factor, which you can also get online as well. So if you're quite good with a spreadsheet, you can probably do some of this yourself. But it depends on how many different options you want to look at. Victoria, so they will give you both figures at the time of retirement. Yes, so they would give you the option A and option B. So they won't give you this choice 2. You get one shot at this choice 2 option, which is now, and you've got until the 20th of May to make that decision. But if you said then went back into 95, then when you then retire, they will give you 95 versus 2015 for that 7 years. They will give you those figures, and those figures should be available before you retire as well. It's just going to take about another 12 or 18 months to filter through. It probably depends on when you're going to retire. Lisa, can you assist with special classes? I should have it, but apparently it's not on my records. I can, but you can do this yourself, you know. If you should have it and it's not on your records, you need to go to your employer and tell them to tell NHS Pensions it needs to be on your record, and get them to provide a copy of your job description, which says that you have a nursing registration or the role needs a nursing registration, because NHS Pensions act on what your employer tells them. So rather than me do that and you having to pay a fee, why would you do that? You could just do it yourself. Nicola, I have to wait 21 years until I reach 60. I have no idea when I want to retire or if I'll have enough at 60. I feel lost as I don't know what the best thing is to do. I know, Nicola, and you're just going to have to take a punt really, or try and get some modelling, so at least gives you an idea, sort of a clearer indication of which is better than which. I know it's really hard. Exactly, Sarah. So Sarah says it seems to come down to when you want to retire. Yeah, it does. A lot of it does. If you want to carry on working full time to 62, for example, probably better off in 2008, because it's going to give you a higher rate of benefit at that age, but not necessarily, but probably. So that's a big part of it. But if you want to retire at 55, it's very likely 95 is going to be better. The fact sheets will show you that, so you can have a look at those, and they do show that quite clearly. But it's hard because you don't always know what you want to do. Annette, when you say service, what does that mean? It is your years and days in the section of the scheme, reduced for any part-time working or unpaid leave, and it should be what's on your total reward statement, or if you ask for an annual benefit statement, you can use that. It should be on there, like, I don't know, 23 years, 200 days or something. Does the original blue booklet provide realistic figures still? The one from 2011, I mean, the figures will still be relevant, but obviously your pay and stuff will have changed. But if you want to look at them for comparison purposes, then you could probably do that if you've still got them. If you want to retire at 60, is it generally better to choose 95 rather than 2008 and lose 5 years? Probably, Sarah. Can't be 100% on that because it's based on circumstances again, but probably. That's what you would tend to assume. Loretta, my NHS pensions history is quite complicated. I've left and returned twice and have been in the pension scheme the whole time. Been in the pension scheme the whole time. Will NHS Pensions be able to give me a breakdown of my pensionable service and what's in which scheme? Yes, they will. It might take them a while. If you've got a pensions officer at your trust, they can do that as well. Ask them for an annual benefit statement, and that includes a breakdown of where you worked and when you worked and the hours you worked and stuff like that, so you can check that, and they should be able to give that to you quite quickly. Mel, I can look at modelling or whatever you want. I just do what you tell me to do. I make suggestions, but I can do what you tell me. Now, France, what happens if you want to retire and return part-time? Would 95 or 2008 be better? Well, it depends on, if you do retire and return, you've got to take all of 95 or all of 2008. So again, it comes down to the calculations. The retire and return doesn't really affect that particularly. Does having a private pension impact at all? Not really, Anne. I mean, no. If you're in the 95 section, can you go into the 1980 pension if that's better for you? Do you mean 2008? Wait for Francis to come back on that one. Darren, hello Darren. It is imperative that a member obtains a modelling report, either your firm or Medifin. Yeah, Medifin is the other firm that I mentioned when I said they're similar to us. Medifin is certainly the approved preferred choice for those specialists as you are. I implore members not to make the decision without professional advice. I'm a specialist IFA for medics, and the reports are very detailed and really will help the member to make an informed decision. Thank you, Darren. It's very nice to hear an IFA say that. I would agree. I would 100% agree, but I do understand that paying out 750 quid is not within the reach of everybody. I totally understand that. It's if you can, and then try and claim it back. And I'm sure, I think Medifin are doing the same as well, because I do talk to Medifin quite a lot. We share things as well, is that we are helping people to try and claim that feedback. We're not just going to leave you in the lurch. And that's kind of included within there as well, because we think this is really unfair and you need this information to make this decision. So I appreciate that, Darren. That's really kind. Thank you. And as I said, it doesn't have to be us. You can go and speak to another financial advisor, speak to Darren. You could speak to Medifin, you could speak to whoever you like. But you do need to understand the decisions you're making. What concerns me from some of the comments that I've already seen in the chat is some of you saying that you don't really know why you made the decision, or you made the decision because somebody suggested, or it was quite a compelling letter. Now that, to me, through no fault of your own, says that you didn't quite understand what it was that you were necessarily doing. And I understand that, because it's really complicated, but that is why specialists are here, to help you to get to the conclusion that is right for you. So we do probably have a think about that. I mean, it's your choice at the end of the day. Do remember that fully forming, because if you don't, the default position will apply. Right, Francis, can you go from 95 to 2008 if that's better for you? Not now, no. You were given 2 options to do that. If you've chosen not to do it, you can't then do it again. So sadly, that door has closed. Hello, Melanie. If you retire with your 60, retire at 60, your 2015 pension would be a lot less than if you retire at 65. Does that need to be a consideration? Possibly. I mean, remember, you can take both sections separately. So you could take 95 at 60 and 2015 at 61, 62, 65, 67, whatever you want to do. 2015 does get reduced for taking it early, but it's grown quicker to start with. So that's kind of a trade-off as well. So it's definitely a consideration, but it's not quite as clear cut as yes, it's this or yes, it's that, because you've actually got loads of options with things like partial now that you didn't have necessarily before. Lynn, I know, I just went with what looked higher. Yeah, I know, Lynn, it's okay. Darren, correct. Far too complex for members to assimilate the information. Must get a report, no question. Darren might put you on some commission, joking, not. But yeah, it is important. I've tried to set this out as clearly as I can for you guys. And if you've been on any of my other webinars, you know that we are really clear. But even when I'm talking to you about it, I feel like this isn't clear at all. And it's just because I can't tell you what to do in your own circumstances until we've analysed it. It's really hard. And I did the calculations at the time. It felt the right decision. But with these 7 extra years back now in our career, definitely want to rethink. Exactly, and that's why you've been given the option to revisit it, because of that change. So no matter what we choose, we will only to be able to take part of our pension at 60, and our 2015 section from April 15, we have to wait to see. No, Lynn, no. Right, I'm going to do, I know a lot of people have dropped me off, I'm aware of the time. Right, no, all of the sections here, you can see here, have a normal pension age. So we've got a normal pension age for 95 of 60, for 2008 of 65, and for 2015, wherever it is gone, or state pension age. That's the normal age that you can take the pension benefits. It's not the earliest age. It's not the mandatory age. It's the normal age. So if my state pension age is 68, which it is, by the way, because I'm so very young, if I want to take my 2015 benefits at 60, I can do that. If I want to take them at 58, I can do that. What will happen is the pension scheme will say, hi, Laura, and I'll go, hello. I'd like to take my 2015 benefits at 60, please. And they'll go, okay, but we were going to pay it to you at 68. And I'll go, I know, but I want it 60. And they'll go, okay, well, it was going to be £10,000 a year at 68. So we're not going to pay you £10,000 a year because you want it 8 years early. Okay, so we're going to pay you £7,000 a year because you're going to have it for 8 years more. So we're going to be paying you a pension for 8 years longer. So all things being equal, I get the same amount of money, but just over more years. Okay, so you are not bound by the normal pension age at all in any of the sections. So long as you're past 55, you can take your pension whenever you like. If you revert back to 95 and you originally joined before 2006, you can actually take your 95 anytime from 50. But they are reduced because you want it for more years. So I always say to people, I'm hoping Darren's going to leap in and back me up on this, don't focus on the age of the scheme. Focus on what you want to do and can you afford to do it, whether that's through a partial retirement, taking 95 at one point and 2015 a bit later, whether you're going to carry on working part-time, whatever that is, you've got to look at all of your options and can you do what you want to do. Forget the age for the scheme. Just look at, can you afford to do what you want to do? Because you can access them whenever, almost. Lisa, hello. What are your thoughts on trivial commutation? About to retire, we'll probably have 2015 from 22 to 24. Ah, right. This is a really good question. Totally not what we're here to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So, trivial commutation is where if your pension benefits in a certain scheme, and in this case it would be 2015, are small, and if they're small, you can potentially take them all as a lump sum. 25% of that would be tax-free, but the rest of the lump sum you would pay tax on, and that's called a trivial commutation, because what we're saying is it's such a trivial amount, have it as cash. That's what they're saying. Now, assuming that you've got other NHS benefits in 95, for example, it means that your trivial commutation means that your 2015 capital value cannot be more than £10,000. Now, the capital value is the annual pension amount times 20. So basically, if your 2015 annual pension is more than £500, then this is not an option to you anyway. I have a real issue with this at the moment because what NHS Pensions are doing, I'll use Lisa as an example, saying, hello Lisa, you've only got a really little bit in 2015 from 2022. Do you want to take it as trivial commutation? Lisa might go, yeah. And I'll say, hang on, Lisa, pause on that decision, because how do you know at this stage that you won't want 2015 to 2022 in the 2015 section? Because you might do, but you haven't been given that option yet, so you can't see the figures. So why don't we not make the decision about the trivial commutation yet? Why don't we leave 2015 alone? And when we get the other option, we'll then know 100% whether we're keeping our benefits up to 22 in 95 or whether we're going to switch some of them back to 2015. And when we know that, then we can make a decision about trivial commutation if it still applies. Does that make sense? I get really upset about these letters because, as with some of the other letters, they're not great. And there are some things missing that you need to be aware of. So I would say trivial commutation, fine, have a look at it, consider it, but wait. No rush. You're welcome. Lynn, they do take a large percentage, the looks of it. So the 2015 section will keep raising in age of the government. But Lynn, I feel that you're not embracing some of the NHS pension stuff here. I'll come back to you in a second. The longer in 2015 it will cost more as the section will go up normal age. I personally have health needs, it's concerned. Right, 2015 grows at 1/54th every year. This is very simplistic. I realise it's a little bit more complicated. 95, for example, grows at 1/80th. 1/54th is 1/3 higher than 1/80th. Okay, so if you take your 2015 pension at 60 instead of 67, for example, it will be reduced by approximately 1/3, but it has increased by more than 1/3 in the first place. So again, don't focus on the percentage, focus on the benefits. So what happens, Lynn, you are not alone, you're absolutely not alone. What happens is people look at the age and then they hear the words reduction and they go, oh, it's terrible. And I'll be like, right, okay. So if I said to you, if somebody said to me, Laura, you can have £100,000 or you can have £150,000 with a reduction, what would I say? My first question would be, what is the reduction on the £150,000? I wouldn't go, oh, I don't want that because it's got a reduction. I'll take the 100 grand. I'm going to be like, well, what's the reduction? Is it £10 or is it £90,000? What's the reduction? So then if somebody says, oh, well, the reduction is going to be 40 grand. So you can have 110 with a reduction or 100 without a reduction. I'll be like, well, I have 110, thanks, because it's more. So we have a thought process. It's a real interesting psychological experiment I see all the time where we see later retirement age and we go, oh, it's a 28% reduction, but it's a 28% reduction on a much bigger number. So if somebody says to me, I can't afford to retire at 60, now I'm in 2015, my initial response is, you wouldn't have been able to afford to retire at 60 anyway then, because although the figures will be different and they will move around, they're not usually so different that they're life-changing amounts unless you work late. And if you work late, then you definitely want more time in the 2015 scheme. Lecture over. You are welcome. Wonderful. Lynn, you need to come on some of the other webinars. We go through loads of this in the other webinars as well. How much notice do you need to produce a report to ensure I meet the deadline of the 20th of May? I'm going to say this, but if all 60 people who are on the session want a report, we might be in trouble. It's not a problem. So what happens is you get in touch with us. We'll give you a form to fill in. You fill in the form. We set you up on a portal. It tells you what information we need. So long as you can get that information to us, then we can usually turn a report around within 2 to 3 weeks, which is plenty of time for the 20th of May. Okay, so there you go. Darren, anecdotal, 60 reports done for flexible retirement for clinicians, the 55 plus 100% have done it. There you go. There you go. Lynn, this is my first time I've been to your webinar. I've not been in your Facebook group. Oh, Lynn, you're more than welcome. I'm webinaring all the time. I was webinaring yesterday. I think we've tried to set up a routine now where we do one a month on different things, but you can come to as many as you like. You can come to repeat ones as well because they'll get updated and changed as things change. But definitely come on the NHS General one because that talks about all this stuff to do with how the schemes work and that. Okay, right. Very aware of time, everyone. Promised my husband I'd be finished by 6:30. He never believes me. Sort of see why. Does anybody have any other questions? I think what to do, I'm going to send you the slides straight away. Take them away, have a look at it, have a think. If you want to know more, come back to me. I think what I'll also do is when I send you the link with the slides, I'll put a link into our inquiry form. And then if you do want any more information or any questions, you can just fill that form in and one of us will be back in touch. You're more than welcome. Jeanette, do you have a webinar on salary sacrifice? No, Jeanette, but I could. Let me write that down. Salary sacrifice and pensions. Okay, I could do one on that. Brilliant. Right, I'm just going to turn off the recording because everybody will be sick now. Right.